Purposes only.
Now on 960 The Patriot, it's the Middle East Radio Forum, your chance to talk about the turmoil in the Middle East. To call in live, dial anytime at 602-508-0960. That's 602-508-0960. Outside of the Valley, call toll-free at 888-960-9696. Questions are also welcome at radioforum@aol.com. That's radioforum@aol.com. Now your host for the Middle East Radio Forum, Attorney William J. Wolf.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. It's Easter Sunday, March 31, 2013. I hope you're having a joyous Easter and a terrific Passover, depending on which one you celebrate. My name is William Wolf, your host every Sunday, noon to 1 o'clock Arizona time. This time of year, it's also noon Pacific time. It's 3 p.m. Eastern time, and it's now 10 p.m., I am informed, in the Middle East. This show is available everywhere in the world on the internet on my website, MiddleEastRadioForum.org. So please do spread the word about this show. People can listen anywhere they have an internet connection. I have a great show scheduled today. I have not yet made contact with my main guest, Ted Bellman, but we're continuing to try to do that. But first, as always, we start off with Yoni Titi, often known as Yoni the Blogger. Yoni, are you with us?
I am, Bill. How are you today?
Well, I'm fine. I'll feel a little bit better once we get Ted Bellman on the line, but go ahead. What do you have for us today, please?
Well, the IDF at the end of last week declassified the debriefing of one Gilad Shalit, who became famous because he was a captor in the Gaza Strip for a long, long time. And it was a very interesting read. We find out that the biggest fear of Gilad Shalit the whole time he was in captivity was not that he would be tortured, not that he would even be murdered. His biggest fear that he was going to be tried for being a coward, that he was going to go to jail for being a coward. That was his biggest fear. And we finally get the full picture of what happened that night. When they were attacked by two terrorists who fired an RPG at the tank, which would be the equivalent of me poking my finger softly into your arm. In other words, it couldn't hurt anybody inside the tank. At that point in time, the tank commander and another soldier that was in the position at the machine gun, they ran away without their personal weapons, and they were the two soldiers that were killed. The driver of the tank, if I remember correctly, was just wounded. Gilad Shalit, at the time of the attack, was asleep inside the tank without his body armor on or his personal rifle. Gilad Shalit refused to come out of the tank. He only came out of the tank after they threw a hand grenade in, which by having his body armor off and hanging, it saved him. Now, why does all this matter? We saw the PR campaign that his family mounted. And you know what? I'm not going to blame the family any more than I'm going to blame Gilad Shalit, because Gilad Shalit probably never should have been a combat soldier. But once again, we look at the leadership in Israel, and we see that they have zero intestinal fortitude. This probably wasn't secret disinformation from the IDF and the high political echelon that this tank crew completely crumbled under fire. With that in mind, why in the world did we trade 1,000 terrorists for a coward? Why would we apologize to the government of Turkey when now he's turning around, Erdogan, and saying, I made the Jews go down to their knees. I made the Jews capitulate. When are we going to learn that we can win every time we take to the battlefield, and every time we sit and we talk, we lose? We don't have men of courage. And the late, great Shlomo Baum, who was the number 2 in command of 101, the 1st Commando Unit under Ariel Sharon, he once told me, he says, Yoni, don't mistake a man's ability to show physical courage on the battlefield with the ability to show moral courage in fighting for the ideals of keeping the state of Israel strong.
Okay, Yoni, thank you very much. Please stay with me. I don't have my main guest on the line yet, and I may ask you to join in the conversation to whatever time you have available. But First, let me do my random thoughts here. I do not understand the American left, and I guess you can add to that the Israeli left, and of course that means the Democratic Party here in the United States. Israel is the only democracy and tolerant society in the Middle East that's surrounded by Muslim states that have mostly sworn to destroy it, to finish the job that Hitler started. Muslim propaganda has spread throughout Europe and the United Nations, making Israel a pariah nation. Not the Congo, where millions have and continue to be slaughtered. Not Darfur. When's the last thing you heard about Darfur or even the Congo? Not very much and not very often. And they have these open genocides going on. Not North Korea or Iran, who openly threaten to wipe other member states of the United Nations off the map. No, just Israel is singled out for pariah status. And remember, Iran has no homosexuals. That may be true because they execute them. And what kind of a country is that? And we don't even condemn that. It's just really amazing. Obama calls for Israel to make suicidal concessions to those who would destroy Israel. Look at Gaza. What better example is there of what would happen if more land is given up to Israel's sworn enemies? The time has long passed for Israel to annex Judea and Samaria, what the Arabs and unfortunately the U.S. media and even some in Israel call the West Bank, and to deport everyone who will not sign a public loyalty oath to Israel. Friends should be welcomed to stay, but enemies must leave, or the continuing terrorism and the slaughter of the innocents will never stop. And that's my random thoughts for today. So, Yoni, let's start talking a little bit about the situation with Israel and Turkey and Obama. That would have been the subject with Ted Bellman. He's not on the line yet. Obama, when he went to Israel as a president, which was just last month in his second term, that was his first trip, he basically starts putting his foot on the neck of Israel, making them do things or trying to make them to do things that will certainly not be helpful to Israel's security. Do you want to talk about that apology he made to Turkey?
You know, yesterday at synagogue, some people asked me what I thought of the apology. And obviously, I was against it. And then one of my lefty friends goes, but Yoni, you don't know what deals were made behind the scenes. You don't know what agreements were made. And Obama probably made deals to help us. And I said, you know what? I've been around for over 30 years now. And some of that time, I was even in positions where I knew what was going on. And I've never seen such a thing. I've always seen Israel get the short end of the stick, but I've never seen these wonderful backroom deals that are supposed to help us. I said, please, if you're in the know, let me know. What is the deal? I said, look, if Obama had just bombed Iran and then he wanted an apology to Turkey as a payment for that, I absolutely would apologize to Turkey after Obama had bombed Iran and bombed their nuclear weapons program into rubble. Of course I would apologize after the fact. But now, what have we gotten for it? We've gotten absolutely nothing for it. We've taken a man that absolutely hates Israel, and we've strengthened him. And that makes no sense to me. That is absolute insanity to me.
Okay, Yoni, I see we have Devin Sper on the line. I think I'd like to let him in on the conversation. So, Gil, if you could put Devin on the line. Devin, are you with us?
I am. How are you, Bill? How are you, Yoni?
I'm great.
Well, we're fine, and we're waiting for Ted Bellman, but we're starting the discussion that Ted was going to talk about. Now, I'd like to, Yoni, give a little background on what this apology was all about. What was the basis for it, the subject matter? It was basically Israel is defending its borders and defending its territory from terrorists coming in with weapons, and the Israelis were attacked with weapons, and they had to fight back, and some of the terrorists or the Turks were killed in this situation. You want to fill that in a little bit for us?
Well, a ship that originated out of Turkey was coming toward Gaza with the intent of breaking the blockade of Gaza. We ordered the ship to stop. The ship didn't stop. Our equivalent of the SEALs went after the ship, boarded the ship, and because of the morons running the IDF in Israel, we sent our commandos onto this ship with their primary weapon being paintball guns, if you can believe it. And they were immediately attacked with knives and iron bars and even guns. There was one sailor that was shot. One sailor was thrown from one deck down a whole deck. And only at that point in time, they drew their personal sidearms, their pistols, and started fighting back, in which we killed 9 of them. The whole thing was stupid to begin with. You know, if somebody's coming to violate your territorial waters, as soon as they cross the line, order them to stop, and then put a torpedo in the ship. Be done with it.
But instead, of course, Israel apologizes. I mean, I don't care what the basis for that.
Bill, not only did we apologize, we're going to be paying out millions of dollars.
Okay, Devin, you want to jump in?
Yes. I want to also point out that the Turks did this as a provocation. And the idea that you can apologize as if these are two 12-year-olds where someone is upset because of a misunderstanding and now they're going to apologize and be your best friend isn't valid for international relations. The Turks sent this flotilla as a provocation because they're seeking to break relations with Israel, because they're seeking to gain credibility as the leader of the Sunni Arab world at Israel's expense and by paying in Israeli coin. And if someone is determined to be your enemy, apologies are only going to play into that. They're not going to change their view of the world. I also want to point out that the United Nations condemned the Turks and said that Israel was correct, that the blockade is justified, and that she was in her rights in preventing the ships that were trying to run the blockade. So not only the United States, but the Europeans and the United Nations as well. And this left the Turkish government in a terrible position. They had sent this ship full of people from a organization called the IHH, which even the Europeans consider a terrorist organization, and they were caught with their hands in the cookie jar. And so 9 Turkish citizens were killed, and the Turkish government has nothing to show for it except for condemnation from the United Nations. And they were very anxious that Israel apologize because that was their way of sliding out from under their foolish policy. And the Israelis have handed them a moral victory that was unnecessary, and I think we can discuss as well the practical consequences of it. In my opinion, they're very grave long term.
Yes, and I did want to get into that. I mean, how does that make Israel look in the world, but more specifically in relation to their sworn enemies in the Middle East or elsewhere? I mean, it makes them look like they're just total, I don't know, for lack of a better word, just wimps. Well,
let me say this. It's worse than wimps. The Turkish government is beating up on Israel in the Turkish media precisely because Israel is unpopular. And it's unpopular in the Arab world because Israel has left the moral field open for Palestinian propaganda without answering the basic moral question as to whether they have the right to be there. And they never make their moral case. They simply allow the Palestinians to make a moral case, and they talk about peace. And so in the minds of the average Turk, and we could safely say the average Muslim, Israel is a pariah state which has no business being there in the first place.
Now, let's just point out for the listeners so they know, Turkey is not an Arab country, but it is a Muslim country. There are many, many Muslim countries that are not Arab. So I just want to make sure there's no misunderstanding about that. Go ahead, Devin.
So if we agree that the reason that the Turkish government ultimately turned against Israel in the first place was the fact that she's allowed her moral position to be undermined, then how can it possibly help the situation for her to further undermine her own moral position by pretending that she was in the wrong in killing these 9 terrorists who were beating the Israeli soldiers with pipes, and the entire world saw that on TV because the Israelis had the presence of mind to film the whole thing. And so the Turks didn't get good media out of it at the time, but now in hindsight they're going to rewrite history and turn everything around with the help of the Israeli government.
Yes, in other words, Israel is, what do they say, pulling defeat out of the jaws of victory.
Yes, I would say that's very well put.
All right, I've got to put everybody on hold for a minute because we are coming on the first break. I have Devin Sper on the line and Yoni Titi on the line, and we're going to continue the discussion even in the absence of my main guest today, Ted Bellman. Listening to Middle East Radio Forum.
Now back to your host, Attorney William J. Wolf.
Welcome back to today's edition of Middle East Radio Forum. It's Easter Sunday. I wish everybody a joyous Easter. I have two guests on the line. I have Devin Sper and Yoni Titi, often known as Yoni the blogger. I understand Yoni has to leave at the bottom of the hour, so I'm going to mainly focus with Yoni, and then we'll continue on with Devin Sper. Yoni, give us your take on what is the long-term effect of Israel acting in strictly self-defense, justified in every way by this proper blockade of terrorists and weapons coming into Israel, and then apologizing to the perpetrators of this offense?
Well, the way I look at it, the real underlying issue is the most dangerous issue, and that's the historic lack of strong leadership shown by Israeli governments. You go back to the war in Lebanon and the occupation of southern Lebanon for the greater good of Israel. But, we were having casualties, and an organization started For Mothers, and that eventually put enough pressure on the Israeli government that we retreated and shamefully left some of our South Lebanese army allies in the lurch. And you look at this latest apology, you look at many different examples through our history where public opinion inside Israel from the radical left has shaped the way that our leaders go. And that's the long-term danger. The fact that we apologized for something that we were justified in, and everybody at the time said we were justified in it, makes us not only look weak, but also diminishes going toward the future our claim of territorial integrity. And, one of the things that Obama said when he was in Israel, that we're going to make a contiguous Palestinian state. Well, I only see the one way that you can do that, and that's to bifurcate Israel in order to connect Judea, Samaria with the Gaza Strip to make this so-called Palestinian state. We need strong leadership, and unfortunately, we haven't had it.
All right, Joni, the obvious question is then, is there anybody on the horizon that you believe would give strong leadership? And if so, what is the possibility they would get into power? You talk about the radical left in Israel, and to me, they seem to be suicidal. I mean, what else do you need to know about the Palestinian Authority or Hamas other than what happened with Gaza? They get some territory, and all they do is use it as a launching pad to attack and try to kill and maim as many Israelis as possible. What else do you need to know? Is there anybody on the horizon that you believe would fit the bill?
I think Bennett, the head of Beit Yehudi, I think he has great potential. We'll see. Time will only tell now that he's the head of his own political party how strong he's going to be. But other than that, I don't see anybody who's got a chance to grow something big enough that they can, come into power in order to do it. It's very frustrating, and it's weird because I remember in 1991 watching the Madrid peace accords, and part of me thought that within a very short period of time we were going to be in much worse trouble than what history has shown us. I don't know what the future is going to hold. I only know that the Palestinians, according to my way of thinking, hold the key to the destruction of the state of Israel. I don't worry about the Syrians. I don't worry about the Lebanese. I don't worry about the Egyptians. I don't worry about any outside force. I have always worried that the Palestinians are going to destroy us from within. They've created a strong radical left wing in Israel with this illusion of a hope of peace. And, you would think that after Oslo, at this point in time in history, there would be nobody supporting sitting down and talking to the Palestinians. But that's not the case.
And the Palestinians haven't changed what they teach their children, what they say in the Arabic media. They say they want it all. And as I've said hundreds of times on Middle East Radio Forum, pick up any Palestinian website and see a map. You will not see Israel on it. What evidence do they need that they don't already have to understand what the Palestinians really want?
As I wrote you last week in an email, You know, there are days that I get so sick and tired of both my countries. You know, and I tell my American friends, you're watching America go down the tubes. I'm watching two of my countries, both my countries go down the tubes simultaneously. All we can do, Bill, people like you, me, and Devin, all we can do is stand up and shout at the top of our lungs the danger that's out there, because the Israeli government isn't. We have failed at PR. My son-in-law was just here from Israel for Pesach, and I gave him my idea of Israel running PR spots. And he was like, oh, my God, why hasn't anybody ever thought of that? Highlighting the good that comes out of Israel, the lives that are saved because of the medical technology. We have allowed the Arabs and the Palestinians to control the narrative. And if all you see day after day is what they say about us, you would think we are just all Nazis reborn. And that's the farthest thing from the truth, because if we were that, we wouldn't have a Palestinian problem today. But thank God we're not that, and thank God we're struggling to a certain extent with this problem, because, you know, we are Jews and we are just. But on the other hand, we have to solve this problem. We need a leader that will annex Judea and Samaria, will demand from Jew and Arab alike a loyalty oath that must be signed. If you don't sign it, we're going to deport you. And we need to march forward with strength, because if we don't, if you think it's bad now, eventually the public support for Israel and America will go away, because you see how issues can be swayed. The number one issue among 25 and younger in America is gay marriage. You know, 15 years ago, it wouldn't even been on the radar.
Well, I think they should be informed that in Israel they've had gay rights parades, no problem. Try to do that in Iran. Try to do that in Syria. Try to do that in any Muslim country and see what happens.
You're going to be killed.
That's right. But Israel is the pariah, not these people who will kill anybody who they find out is a homosexual.
Well, of course Israel's the pariah, because the fact that Jews are holding land that was once controlled by Muslims means that until the Muslims regain control of that land, they're at war with us, and it doesn't matter how long it takes. We're products of the modern age, and we think from 1 minute to the next, and the Muslims are product of the Middle Ages, and they think long-term, and we aren't even capable of thinking long-term.
Okay, Yoni. Any parting comments before I let you go? I'll give you about 30 seconds.
We sometimes can focus on what's going on in the here and now, and I'll go back to 1991, where I thought within a few years Israel was going to be gone, and we're still around, and God's not going to let us disappear, and we've got to keep up our strength in the good fight, and everything's going to work out.
But of course, I think God works through giving people the ability to defend themselves.
Absolutely.
And Israel has to learn that.
I agree 100%.
All right, Yoni, thanks very much. I look forward to you being on the show again next week. Devin Sper is with us, and I see Dr. Steve Carroll is also with us, and I'll introduce Dr. Carroll after the break. You're listening to Middle East Radio Forum here on 960 The Patriot. My name is William Wolf, your host every Sunday, noon to 1 o'clock Arizona time. Adjust if you're listening on the internet on my website, MiddleEastRadioForum.org. Please get your calls in. We don't want to miss any of your calls. You've got the number here. 602-508-0960. We'll be right back with Devin Sper and historian Dr. Steve Carroll.
Back to your host, attorney William J. Wolf.
Welcome back to today's Easter Day edition of Middle East Radio Forum. My name is William Wolf, your host every Sunday, noon to 1 o'clock Arizona time. Adjust your time if you're listening elsewhere on my website, MiddleEastRadioForum.org, where you can also listen to old shows in the archives. We're talking about President Obama in Israel and the forced apology that Israel had to make to Turkey. I've got Devin Sper on the line. I also have historian Dr. Steve Carroll on the line. Dr. Carroll, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Thank you for being with us. Before we get to you, though, Devin, do you have any comments about anything that I or Yoni have said, or anything you'd like to add about the subject so far?
Well, I have quite a bit, so it depends how long you want me to...
Go ahead for 2 or 3 minutes, then I'll ask Dr. Carroll for his comments.
Okay. First of all, I agree with Yoni's point of view, and I think that in addition to the moral consequences, there were very severe practical consequences for Israel's apology to Turkey that I think the government of Israel has not thought through. And this concerns consequences with Turkey, with the Muslims in general, with the United States' view towards Israel, and in Israel herself. So let's just, since we have 2 or 3 minutes, let's just start with Turkey. I want to say that the apology to the Turkish government for their provocation against Israel will not win them any support among the Turkish people and will not help them in their relationship with the Turkish government. The Turkish government will pocket this apology. They will use it to justify their previous bad behavior. And as you know, if you encourage bad behavior, you can expect more of the same. So we can expect more flotillas and more requests for apologies after the next flotilla. Now yes?
Yes, go ahead.
Now the counter-argument is that, well, Turkey and Israel needed to cooperate on the issue of chemical weapons in Syria, and so Obama wanted them to be, wanted an apology. In that case, which is true, the Turks could have apologized for the provocation, or at the very minimum, they could have asked the Turks to drop their disingenuous accusations against Israel for defending herself. Why Israel should be put in a position of apologizing for defending herself makes no sense to me.
Okay, Devin, and I'll mention Devin wrote a terrific book, The Future of Israel, and Devin's been a frequent guest on the show. Go ahead, Dr. Steve Carroll, the official historian of Middle East Radio Forum. Go ahead with your comments.
Several points. First, about Turkey. Israel should have never apologized. Erdogan is milking this for all he can get, and as has been said, turns wrong into his right. But the fact is, he needs Israel militarily more than Israel needs him. He needs Israel for his military machine, which the Israelis have been upgrading. And he faces a threat from Iran almost as great as Israel, because Turkey is largely Sunni. There is a long historic rivalry between Turkey and ancient Persia, modern Iran, for domination and hegemony of the region. And Shiite Iran views him as a rival. And those missiles that the Americans put in Turkey were for his defense against Iran. He knows the Israelis want to take on Iran alone if need be. He needs to cooperate, but he doesn't. He believes Israel is expendable. And while we're talking about Turkey, what we need is an Israeli government, and there is already one member of Knesset, Moshe Feiglin, who has raised the issue, to now demand internationally a public apology for the Turkish role in the sinking of the MV Struma. For those who don't remember, the Struma was a dilapidated boat.
30 seconds.
Chartered in 1941, left Constanta on the Black Sea of Romania, loaded with over 700 Jewish refugees who were trying to get to British Mandatory Palestine. The boat broke down out of as it approached Istanbul, Turkey's harbor. Was in the harbor. The Turks did not let the Jews offload. And on February 28th, 1942, Turkey towed the boat, which had no workable engine, out into international waters in the Black Sea, where it was subsequently sunk, probably by accident, by a Soviet submarine, and all 291 crew and refugees perished, except for one man who swam to safety.
All right, Dr. Carroll, I've got to stop. You are coming up on the next break. I understand Ted Bellman's now on the line. We'll introduce Ted right after the break, and we'll basically find out what Ted has to add to the discussion. You're listening to Middle East. Welcome back to the final segment of today's Middle East Radio Forum. My name is William Wolf, your host every Sunday, noon to 1 o'clock Arizona time. I understand Ted Bellman's on the line. Ted, are you with us?
Embarrassed, but with you. I have to apologize. I was invited out to dinner, and I thought I had all the time in the world. I can get back, and then I'm going to have to wait for the call. And then I lost track of time, and I couldn't believe how late it was. So I'm sorry.
All right, well, that's all right. We got you on. Now, let me introduce you briefly. You're the publisher of IsraPundit.com. I'm going to spell that IsraPundit.com. You're originally a Canadian, but you've moved to Israel. We've been talking about the situation with Obama coming to Israel and basically putting demands forward, including forcing Israel to make an apology to Turkey. Now, you may say some things that we've already talked about, but because you weren't listening. But go ahead.
I heard the last caller.
Okay.
And that's the only one that I heard, and he was certainly knowledgeable. That doesn't mean I agree with everything he said. But let me tell you my view of the apology. First of all, it was outrageous that we should apologize for something we did of necessity, that we had the legal right to do, that we did properly. There was no reason for an apology. Now, from the atmosphere, once Bibi accepted the apology, there was a suggestion, Obama interceded, and he set up the phone call and stuff like that. And the truth of the matter is, something of this nature is negotiated over months and years. This has been negotiated. And Kerry was in Turkey at this time, and it was all directed to working out a final deal. So believe me, it didn't happen as a result of the phone call, number one. Now, the Prime Minister of Turkey said that Israel was under enormous diplomatic pressure to do this deal. Now, somebody said it was a win for Bibi because Bibi got what he wanted that he had offered, I think, 2 years ago.
That means Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel.
I'm sorry. So, and I say, forget it. He should have never offered this deal 2 years ago. So it's no victory that now it's being accepted. It should never have happened. Now, what happened was that Netanyahu knew that he was doing something the Israeli people didn't support. So the announcement came just before Shabbat and just before Pesach. So therefore, the opposition to him, the voices could not be heard, and they were watered down, and people were on holidays. So he greatly reduced the vocal opposition. Secondly, he arranged for all kinds of people connected to the government to come out and support him, many of whom shocked me by their support. For instance, Yalon supported him. Bennett didn't oppose him. And a number of other people lined up, went public the next day in support. To my mind, he forced that support. And he exercised discipline, and he says, as part of the government, you have to accept or support this decision. But Martin Sherman, Pipes, Ephraim Enbar, all kinds of prominent people came out and said this is a horror story, which is where I am. Should never have happened.
All right, so what does the future hold for us now that it has happened?
Nothing. Nothing's changed, really. It's only going to be better for Turkey, who needs us, as the other gentleman said, more than we don't need them. We can manage ourselves. Obama needs us to support his favorite child, which is Erdogan, the prime minister or president, or whatever the title is, of Turkey. But I just posted an article from a terrific American writer, Andrew McCarthy, who was the lead prosecutor on the 9/11 prosecution. And he's an expert now in Islam. And he was very much against the apology. And he said, as his title, Hamas has won. Now, what did he mean by that? Well, one of the first things that Erdogan is doing, he's visiting Gaza in support of Hamas. And he's very supportive there, and he's giving them money. Similarly, before Obama's first inauguration, Obama already was siding with Hamas and trying to bring them in from the cold that had been imposed on them by the Bush administration. So the Obama policy to embrace Hamas slowly but steadily, just the way they embraced the PLO, which at first America pledged themselves never to talk to them, and before we turned around, they were already being invited to the UN, and they were talked about, and we had a Palestinian state.
Yeah, these are recognized terrorist organizations, Hamas.
Yes, but we still
and
accept
PLO. I mean,
their
whole reason for being is to kill Jews.
Exactly. exactly. But the Fatah is no different. They're the same place as Hamas. And don't ever think that they're moderate. They aren't. They have the same kind of charter, which Arafat agreed to change but never did. And it calls for one state, not Israel, and that's what they want. So meanwhile, the reason McCarthy said this was a victory for them, because now they've got the political support of Turkey and also of the United States, who want to completely bring them in and make them a respectable. And Europe already is trying very hard, because originally Europe said, well, if they want to be respected and have the terror, they have to accept all the international agreements. There's three things they have to do, none of which they've done. Nevertheless, Europe, Turkey, and America are now forgetting about those three things and trying to whitewash them in any event. So this apology had a lot to do with that whitewashing also.
Okay, we've got a caller. I want to get the caller on, and I note that we have three experts on the phone right now: Dr. Steve Carroll, Devin Sper, and Ted Bellman. And Steve from Northwest Phoenix, who are you going to direct your question to of those three?
All three or any of the three. We're a Christian listener here every Sunday, and I just want to know, we've had Passover, today is Easter. Is it a small and narrow prism to look at Israel through the Bible? What does the Bible say about Israel and its present, past, and its future? Everybody else can take a flying leap.
Okay. Which of my other guests would like to answer that question?
Devin? I'll let somebody else answer it.
Devin, go ahead. Oh, Devin dropped. Dr. Carroll, you want to respond to that question from Steve in Northwest Phoenix?
Well, the Bible gives us the inspiration. There are many who look at it as the guiding force for what is to come. But again, to kind of paraphrase what you said and what Benjamin Franklin once said, God helps them who helps themselves. We can't just look at the Bible, and there are many of our Christian listeners as well as Jewish listeners, and I meet them when I publicly speak, and they say, well, it'll be okay, God will take care of everything. But if you just sit and wait for God to take care of everything, it may not happen according to your need and your timetable. Therefore, we on this earth must do our best, if we're supporters of Israel, to support it, to stand up for it, to wage the public relations campaign that is not being waged. That is what's necessary. And I just want to make sure, because someone said I may have misspoken, when the Struma sunk, there were 791 people aboard, all perished except one. And if Turkey now will demand, because there are negotiations between Israel and Turkey for compensation for the 9 Turks, the Turkish attempted murderers of IDF soldiers, there is now talk about $1 million compensation for each dead Turk. Then Israel must have the fortitude to say, well, we represent the Jewish people. Let us get $791 million in restitution for what you did to the Struma.
Okay.
Now, obviously, this isn't going to happen, but it's going to make people think and realize there's not just one way that this story flows.
Okay, I want to go to Devin Sper with a response. Do you have a response to Steve of Northwest Phoenix's question about the Bible?
Yes, the Bible says clearly in Genesis 12, God says to Israel, I will bless those that bless you, and I will curse those that curse you. In the long run, this has been the reality. Nations like the United States that have supported Israel have prospered and become the greatest power in the world, and those who supported her enemies, like the Soviet Union, are no longer with us. This is, in the long historical context, what has actually happened. And I agree also with Dr. Carroll that we should not wait passively for God to do something, but the fact that God favors us is because we do His will. And so God expects Israel to do His will, for which He blesses them.
Okay, Joel from Phoenix, you have a question? Who do you want to ask the question
Well, I'd
to?
like to address it to both gentlemen. I would like to know, in my mind, there will never be peace with the Jews or Israel, is because the rest of the world, including the Arabs and Europeans and everything, always want to think of a Jew as a ghetto Jew, head-bowed, walking in subjugation. I don't think they need scapegoats. The world needs a scapegoat. What do you think, gentlemen?
Well, Joel, this is Devin. I think that if Israel acts like a ghetto Jew, which it does when it apologizes for her existence or for defending itself, then the world will relate to her as she did to the Jews in the ghetto, and this is a grave mistake.
Okay, Ted or Steve, you want to jump in with a response to Joel?
When the Israelis won the Six-Day War and came back from the verge of defeat in the Yom Kippur War of 73, it is then that the world will give Israel respect. Too many Jews want to be loved. They do not love us. That's proven over 2,000 years. We need respect, and respect, unfortunately, in this planet is based on force, and leave us alone, because if you don't, it'll happen again.
Okay, and we've been saying that many times on Middle East Radio Forum. Israel has never won a war because it's always left the enemies who wish to destroy it in position where they can just rearm, re-equip, and do it again. And it's just amazing to me. I mean, there's no more Nazi Germany. There's no more Imperial Japan because there was unconditional surrender. Israel has never done that. And I'm not sure they're ever going to get the will to do that.
Let me cut in there with one comment.
All right, this is Ted Bellman. Go ahead, Ted.
America has never allowed Israel to win a war.
Okay.
Well, Ted, I got to say I disagree with
Devin
you.
Sper.
This is Devin Sper, and I got to say I disagree with you. It isn't the United States which stopped Israel from winning the first Lebanese war. On the contrary, President Bush in his memoirs tells of his disappointment that they didn't go in and deal with Hezbollah the way they should have.
I have to accept that, but they stopped them from winning in 1967. They stopped them from winning in 1973. They also in the first invasion of Gaza, they stopped them.
Well, when you say they stopped them, what you mean is they asked them to stop.
And Israel had poor leadership and wasn't prepared. Whether we were going to be allowed to wipe the floor with them, we don't know.
All right, Devin, go ahead, please.
Well, what you mean when you say they stopped them is that they asked them to stop, and they will always ask, for the situation to be calm and stable. But Israel's a sovereign country, and her government had to do what was in Israel's interest. And the fact that the United States asked...
Don't think that the government is free to do what it wants, because America applies enormous pressure on Israel to affect their decisions.
I got to say, I strongly disagree. I know that
right, but I'm making my point. We can disagree, but that's my belief.
I'll support you in this way, Ted, that is a mainstream belief in Israel, but nevertheless, I feel the facts don't support it, and it's an easy excuse for the Israelis not to take responsibility for themselves and to claim that the United States is the puppeteer behind which controlling everything. They obviously don't control Iran, and they don't control Turkey, and if Israel didn't want to, they wouldn't control her either.
Okay, now I'm going to have this conversation at some time in the future. We're out of time, but Ted Bellman and Devin Sper and perhaps Steve Carroll, maybe we'll get on a show all together and we'll continue this discussion. I mean, we do not walk in lockstep. As you can see, Devin has quite a different opinion than Ted about some of these issues. And I do think it's healthy for us to discuss these on the air so people can listen. Ted Bellman, thanks very much for being with us. We're going to have to get you on again. I said perhaps with Devin Sper. And we'll get you on for a whole show next time, hopefully.
Very good.
Anyway, I appreciate the fact that you did get to us before the end of the show. Dr. Steve Carroll will be the guest next Sunday. Dr. Carroll, of course, is the official historian of Middle East Radio Forum. He's the most frequent guest, and he will be on with his Dateline Middle East news analysis and commentary. And please do spread the word about this show. Dr. Carroll Always a terrific presentation. And do check out the old shows in the program archives. The website is MiddleEastRadioForum.org. Listen to old shows anytime you like, and you can listen anywhere in the world.